Hello, welcome to Mind the Wind. In this video, I'm going to be taking apart the Seagull ST36 movement. Recently, I've gotten really into watch restoration videos, and I find myself watching hours of videos from Wristwatch Revival, watch repair tutorials, Red Dead Restoration, and I just love seeing the process from start to finish, taking something old and broken and bringing it back to like the day it was first put on the shelf. And so I'm getting into the hobby myself, and the ST36 seems to be the best starting place. So I'm giving it a shot. So this watch movement holder, I actually built myself. I had an old light and it didn't work. So I took the light and the electronics out, and I put some padding and a little base on the inside and a little bit of vinyl on the top, and it actually works pretty well. I did buy a few extra tools that you don't necessarily need as a beginner, at least according to videos that I watched. You should be able to do all this with just tweezers alone, but I did buy some hand remover tools and a canyon pinion remover as well. Since I want to get into this more regularly anyway, I figured it wouldn't hurt to have those on hand. So I went ahead and bought them, and I'm glad I did. They did definitely make this easier, especially the canyon pinion you'll see in just a moment. It seems like that would be really easy to go flying away if you use tweezers. Yeah, so here's the tool, and it came off super easy. So I'm definitely glad that I bought that tool. And then here goes the starting of removing the parts to the keyless works. And I'm sorry my hands are in the way. It was a little hard to find a place to put the camera, and I'm new to this, so definitely bear with me if at any point it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. But still, starting the removal of the keyless works here. And then I do have a bunch of different trays, and the way this kind of makes the most sense to me is to put like parts together. So all the parts that go to the keyless works here, I'm putting in the same bin. Oh, and then just here, there goes the yoke spring. Definitely a rookie mistake, but this is why I'm learning how to do this. I went flying away. I was pretty dumbfounded, but thankfully my wife just happened to come in, and she said, "Why do you have a staple on your floor?" But actually wasn't a staple. It was that yoke spring. And so she found it for me. Thankfully, that was not lost. And so I continue with the disassembly with these wheels. These were a little bit tricky to get out. It's pretty small to work with, and getting into watch restoration, you are definitely made aware of the fine motor skills you may or may not have. Working with parts so small, it definitely takes a little bit of practice to be able to take these out with tweezers and definitely not damage anything as well. Eventually, though, I did get all the parts out, and so I'm putting all the parts to the keyless works together, so that when I get back to reassembling the movement, I know that all these parts will more or less go together. And I am trying to keep track of which direction the gears are facing, because each side of the gear is actually a little bit different. The top side is a little more domed, where the bottom is flat to sit against the main plate. And then there's that yoke spring again. Definitely want to put that away so I don't lose that again. Now, turning this movement over, you get to see just how pretty of a movement it is. For being as cheap as it is, I am really impressed with it. It's visually appealing. I know it's not the highest quality, but it's at least nice to look at. And so removing the setting lever screw and taking out the crown, I realized that the rest of the keyless works dropped into my movement holder there. And so I ended up, thankfully they stayed intact, but I ended up putting them back where they would have gone to take them out, just for the sake of knowing how to disassemble it and where they should go, where I should take them out of. And again, I put them in that tray with the rest of the keyless works, but that was definitely a mistake on my part that those fell out. So lesson learned there. And turning it back over, now I'll get to start disassembling the rest of the movement. And going to start with the balance. And As you can tell, I grabbed the wrong tool, so this is definitely something to learn as well, is just how to keep more of a tidy work area. But we'll go ahead and take out that screw, and then I have another movement holder. I just bought these from Hobby Lobby. They were like $1, and I went ahead and got a couple of parts trays, and these I like because they have lids on them. So again, I can put like parts together to know where they should be going back into the movement, and then I could close them up. So even if by accident I were to drop this, my parts aren't going to go flying all over the place. Now I'll start taking out the wheels, the winding wheels there. And then this one, well, before we get there, but the other wheel actually has a reverse thread on it, and so you got to turn it the opposite way to get it to come out. And there it goes. Put those in the tray together, that way I know when I reassemble it that all those parts are in the same general area. And then here goes the click. We'll take that out. And these parts are really small, so I'm really trying to be careful that those don't go flying away. You can see the spring as well. That actually fell out. Thankfully, that did not go flying away, but I did have to make sure to be careful with that. It's a very thin part, so don't want to smash it or anything like that. Then now I'm taking off the rest of that bridge. Now again, this is my first time taking apart a watch movement, so I'm really trying to be careful and just make sure that everything's there, but I am realizing just how easy it is to kind of be clunky and how delicate these parts are. So there goes the barrel, which holds the mainspring, and that powers the watch if you don't know. And then we'll go ahead and move on, and going to remove the pallet fork bridge. Oh, excuse me. Actually, this is the escape. This holds the escape wheel in place. But we'll take that out and put that away for safekeeping. And now here goes that pallet bridge. So we'll take out the 2 screws on each side, and we'll kind of put them in the same bin as well. And you can see even that little movement moved the bridge, which you have to be careful not to break the pivots, but thankfully none of that happened here. And then I'll take out the little pallet fork, and we'll go ahead and put that in the bin as well. But you can see just how small these parts are and how easy it could be to break them. And that's why they suggest this movement. It's cheap, inexpensive, so that if something does break, you're not completely far gone and out of money or time. We'll go ahead and move this wheel bridge. Just a couple little screws and it'll come right apart. And there we go. Comes right off. And again, Just the finishing on this movement's really pretty. At the time of shooting this video, these are about $36, $36 to $42, and that kind of finishing is just aesthetically pleasing, and it's really kind of cool. Now there goes the center wheel. There goes the third wheel. Oh, I'm sorry. The other was the fourth wheel, and then there's the third wheel and the escape wheel. And again, I'm putting all the wheels together so I know when I put them back that those are all in the same general place. There goes that setting lever screw. Want to make sure to take that out. And then funny enough, that's the first thing that goes back in to make sure, because as you put the bridge over it, that's what actually holds it in place. So I make sure to put that first. And then I start by putting the train of wheels back in, starting with the escape wheel. And this took a little bit of maneuvering just to get exactly in the jewel hole. I did buy some eye loop, so I am using that for magnification to at least help. But even so, again, the fine motor skills take a little bit of practice. There goes that fourth wheel. That one's a little bit easier because the pivot on it is quite a bit longer, so that one's actually not too bad to put in. There goes the third wheel, and then be putting in the center wheel in just a moment. And this one, it seems like it should go in the other way, but it doesn't, so that's why it took me just a second. It seemed a little confusing to me as far as which direction to put the wheel in. But thankfully, because I had this all recorded, I can go back and reference whatever I need. So if you're considering getting into this, recording or at least taking pictures is definitely a good idea just to reference your work should you get lost or forget anything. And there goes that center wheel, and now the barrel. Now remember, I talked about being careful, and the first thing I did is drop that on the center wheel. Fortunately, nothing broke, but again, having the fine motor skills to really do this carefully definitely takes some practice. There we go, and I'm just checking to see if I have all of these in the correct places and that they're lined up inside the jewels. And so you can see here the escape wheel kind of slipped away from me, and so it took me a minute to try to get it back into its jewel and to line up that pivot, which it was a little bit tricky, but eventually I do get it back into place. It's just a little bit hard to work when it's that small. And there we go, finally got it set back into place. And then so the next thing to do is to put on that wheel bridge, and have to be careful to line it up with the jewels up top. Those three jewels should line up with the top pivots of these wheels, but you have to be super careful not to break the pivots. So I really try to take my time and line it up with the screw holes and sort of kind of got it in the general area. Saying this part was definitely tricky, trying to line those three pivots up with each of the wheels, or each of the jewels, excuse me. But it seems like it fell into place there, and so I just want to make sure that those wheels aren't completely moving or out of balance. So it looks like they're about lined up, and see, I could start spinning that center wheel. The escape wheel is not engaged right now, so that at least tells me that these wheels are lined up correctly. So I can go ahead and put the screws back and put this wheel bridge back into place. And we'll put those screws back. Now, I've definitely never done this before, and so it's really a cool new experience. And I actually picked up a little bit more than I thought from just watching a bunch of videos, and I've bought a couple of books. So I've definitely done some research beforehand, before just buying a movement and diving completely in. I've done a lot of research to try and help me in the process, and I definitely say that it did help because I didn't feel completely lost. Well, this was not necessarily easy. It wasn't so overwhelming that I felt like I couldn't do it. And so here goes the bridge for that escape wheel, which if I put this in correctly, then I can at least test and see if the whole wheel train is engaged. Honestly, that I almost knocked over that parts tray with all the keyless works, which again, just got to be careful and take your time. And it's easy to realize how much time you may or may not be taking. So now you can see once I did that, all the wheels start spinning. So that means that I got that bridge in the correct place, and it has the escape wheel lined up where it should be. So I'll go ahead and put that screw back. And just to check one more time, if I turn the wheel and all the wheels in the gear train move, then I know everything is installed correctly. So from there we can keep going on with the reassembly, and we'll put that pallet fork into place. I would say this was definitely one of the most tricky parts, trying to get the bottom pivot of that pallet fork into the jewel just right. Really took a little bit of trial and error. And we'll go ahead and put the pallet fork bridge back, get that lined up, and just check how it's seated, see if it's still holding the pallet fork in place where it should be and that it doesn't come out of its jewel. And it looks like I got it, so I'll go ahead and put the screws back. Seeing that screw slipped away from me, so a little too tight on the tweezers. And then what I realized later is that I find it's actually better if I kind of line up both screws and have them about where they want to go, as opposed to putting one in, tightening it, and then putting the other. So in the future, I'll kind of do that, and I'll put both screws in place before I actually screw them down. And then that way I also have them there ready to adjust if I need to, or if the pallet fork ends up moving out of alignment and I need to adjust, I have both screws kind of there at the ready. Put those back in, and then just move the pallet fork side to side to see if it is engaging. Still looks like it is, so I'll go ahead and continue with the reassembly. And so here goes that barrel bridge. We'll put that back, but here I have it upside down, so got to turn it over. There we go. That one was pretty easy to put back on, so I'll get my screws and we'll just put this all back together. The nice thing about this movement is that it's pretty big. So even without a loop, you could probably see everything at least enough so that you could reassemble it and disassemble it without heavy magnification. But again, I thought it would be better ahead of time to get some loops, especially since I want to continue doing this. And so I did use the loops when putting all this together. And so now that I have the bridge back on, now I can look at putting the winding wheels back in place. So there's that wheel, and then it has the washer that you got to put inside. And of course this has that screw that's reverse threaded. So lefty tighty, righty loosey, which is so backwards from everything that you're taught. But from what I understand, it's basically because as you turn the crown, if it was righty tighty, lefty loosey, then in theory it could loosen the screw and it could fall out, and that could cause damage to different parts in the movement or just have it stop altogether. So that's why it's reverse threaded. And here goes that other wheel to wind the mainspring. Sits over the barrel, and it's actually got a little square in it. It's kind of hard to tell. It's not zoomed in enough, but the other wheel is actually square cut out in the center, and that links up with the barrel arbor that just goes through the main plate there, and that helps it sit in place. But before I put that wheel in, I need to put the click spring back, and then the click itself, which is what helps make the ratcheting noise as you wind your watch, and it locks in with the gears. So you just have to be careful the way you put that back in, and you kind of need to move it out of the way in order to put the wheel in so it lines up with the teeth. And there's the click. Really kind of a neat part that's really satisfying to wind a watch, and you get the click, and it's through this little lever right here. Now this, I'm just fumbling trying to get the screw. This particular screw is really small, and so it took a little bit of maneuvering to get it with the tweezers. But I went ahead and I just got the wheel instead. That way I can line those two parts up before I actually put the screw back. And here goes the screw for that winding wheel. Put that back into place. And then there's that little screw for the click, which I was fighting with, but I managed to get it pretty easy this time. Just having to turn it over, it fell upside down on the movement, and so I'm trying to put it back into place exactly where it should go. And I think one of the hardest things with this is actually using the eye loops. I had the tendency to just try to look on it straight away, but I found every time I use the eye loop, because everything is magnified, it's just easier to see exactly where the screw's going in, where the screwdriver's going, and it makes everything a lot easier. So that is a hard habit to break, just from years of fixing things, and you just look at it straight on. You don't necessarily use magnification, and so that's a new skill aside from everything else we've talked about, those fine motor skills as well. But definitely using the loop is something that you have to get used to. But every time I tend to put this stuff in a lot easier than when I was just trying to look on it without the loop. And so here I'm just making sure that the screws that I put in were all tight. And I did put a little wind in the mainspring so that if I tap on the pellet fork, like you see there, as it flings to one side or the other, that means that it's engaged properly and lined up how it should be. And this means now that I can think about putting back in the balance. And so again, I'm just checking, making sure that is good to go. And it does spring back and forth, the pellet fork. And so now I can get the balance and put this back in. And this I'm trying to be really delicate. It's kind of a scary thing, but everybody online talks about how easy it is to damage the hairspring. It's so thin and delicate that I was afraid. So I really, really took my time. But it was quite difficult, so you have to be really careful with it, but it's also hard to set into place. And so this took a lot of trial and error to get it seated properly. And this being my first assembly, this actually went quite well. A few days later, I was doing the process again, just taking it apart and trying to put it back together. And the balance slipped out of my tweezers and it sort of fell off my movement here and it completely bent the hairspring. So I did learn from that just how delicate they can be. And it wasn't a far slip either. It just fell onto the little black part you see on the edge there, but that was enough to damage the hairspring. So I ordered me another one so that I can continue practicing on. And since then, it's definitely gone a lot better, but I'm even more careful now when I reinstall the balance here. And here I'm just trying to see where the jewel is so that I can line that up with the pallet fork. And so that's what I was turning it over to look at. And so I've kind of seen that if you twist it in and put it back into place, it engages with that and it'll line up a lot easier. But as you can see, this still was just a lot of trial and error, taking it slow and trying to get it seated properly. But this was the most difficult part. Again, just knowing how delicate that hairspring is and trying not to rush through it. And so I think I about got it here. And nope, not just yet. So here we go. Trying to line it up again. And back and forth. And you can see it started to pick up, so almost had it seated properly. And so we'll try again and again and again. But this is part of the fun, right? Just working with something this intricate and delicate. I don't know. This is part of what I find really enjoyable about watch restoration, and just this kind of meticulous work is very zen to me. So even though it took a while, I actually enjoy the meticulousness of a process like this. And just like that, almost by accident, I got it seated right where it should be, and that hairspring kicked right up. And in watch restoration videos, that's always the most exciting part, when you put the balance back and the hairspring kicks up like that and the watch comes back to life. Super exciting. So for as many hours as I've watched of watch restoration videos, this was really exciting to have that hairspring kick up and know that I reassembled the watch correctly, at least up until this point. And now I can start the reassembly of the keyless works. This part was definitely tricky. And so there's the canyon pinion. Go ahead and put that back in. Just push it down with the tweezers. But this part took me a little bit. I did leave some of the footage out just because it took a long time. I had to go back and watch exactly where the parts were supposed to go. One of the things I kept doing was putting the yoke spring in backwards, and so that wasn't engaging any of the mechanisms properly. So I had to go back and put it together. But eventually I figured it out, and so this is that footage. I just spared a little bit of that for the sake of time, but you can see here the reassembly of the keyless works. And remember I was saying the gears are slightly shaped different from top to bottom, and this I was making sure that I had those put in correctly and making sure that the teeth were all lined up together. So sorry if my head is in the way there. And I realized I had grabbed the wrong gear. The one I had tried to put there just then was actually for the keyless works. And so there we go. There go those two wheels. Got those put in together. And now here goes the keyless works part, which was the part I had in there a minute ago. But I put it back where it should go, and here go the rest of the pieces. And then what also made this a little bit tricky was putting in the yoke and the yoke spring together to make sure, one, that it didn't go flying away, and two, that it was aligned correctly. So here I'm putting the crown back in just to kind of help with this part. And then there's that screw you put in very first thing at the start of the reassembly. And so I'm just holding it on the other side and putting it back together. A lot of the things that I learned for this movement, again, I watched other YouTubers like Chris Watch Revival. He has a video putting it all together, and so I definitely use that as a reference. If you haven't seen his video, you should go check it out. Same with watch repair tutorials. I've watched his video many times as well on how to put this movement together, and so between the two of them, I did feel pretty prepared to actually tackle this movement, and for the most part everything went pretty smooth. And so now I'm just checking that everything is engaging properly. And so looks like it is linking up together. And finally, one of the last pieces to the assembly is going back into place. Got to line it up with, there's these little notches, and then you also have to put it all together. And this part's spring loaded, so making sure that that part links in as well. So this ended up being a little bit tricky just to figure out where everything goes. Again, a lot of this was just patience and trial and error, and I had the idea of where every part was supposed to go, but again, in the sake of practicing, just figuring all this out, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I've never done this before. This is my first time disassembling and reassembling a watch movement, and I'm enjoying every minute of it, and it's really nice to be learning something new and learning new skills. And so if you have any tips or suggestions, put them in the comments. I'd love to know if you have experience with watch repair, what things have worked for you, and what things, if you've made mistakes as well. Like I said, I ended up breaking the hairspring on this in another trial of assembly and disassembly of this, and that's all part of the process. And there we go, finally got that lined up. These screws are so tricky. At least I thought I had it lined up, but there goes that screw. So I'll grab it again, put it back again. And see, earlier in the video I mentioned using the loop. This was one of those parts where I was just trying to eyeball it without the loop, but when I finally got the loop back on, it went a lot easier. And so that, that was something for me where I learned, use the loop, even if it's not really something that you're used to. Saying that's where I adjust the loop. And then I could actually see what I'm doing, see how the screws lined up, and just like that, got it in and got it screwed down, and that part is exactly where it was supposed to be. Okay, and I'm just checking that ground, see if it's engaging with everything, and it feels like it is. So one of the only things left to do is to put the hands back, just to make sure that as I turn that it'll actually turn the hands, and that the second hand is still going, which that balance is still moving freely. So seems like this reassembly went together quite well. Now, this was by no means a perfect reassembly, but I did want to put this out there because if you're like me and you've wanted to get into learning how to assemble and disassemble watches and get into restoration or repair, that it's totally possible. Zero experience previous to making this video, and fortunately I was successful in assembling and reassembling this movement, and it was a lot of fun. And so I definitely suggest trying one out. If this is something you've considered, look into it. If I can do it, then I think others can as well. It takes a little bit of practice and patience, and I know I'm at the level 0. If there was a level 0 of watchmaking, that's about where I'm at. And after this assembly and reassembly, I'm maybe at 0.2 at max. But you know, it's a journey, and I look forward to seeing where it goes and what I learn in the future. At any rate, thanks for watching, and all the best.